The first part of my title is a reworking of Gramsci's People versus Power Bloc opposition. He used this opposition to demonstrate how the Italian fascists, they mobilized the resentment of the people against the power bloc. But my purpose is not to explain the fascist strategy. I have sundered people and separated margins from it, making it a third space. So power bloc, people, and margins. I have used margins instead of people in order to draw attention to the problems of the most poor, the most untouchable, and irreparably violated by the law. And to things often marginalized or overlooked or don't get the attention they deserve. I have done this with a view to affirm a belief in democracy that is still to come, a democracy with a commitment to inclusion and equality. Participating in the 1949 Constituent Assembly debates and reacting to a purely nationalist conception of freedom and sovereignty without equality. Ambedkar said, caste is anti-social. Caste as the factor obstructing, hindering the process towards a nation of equal citizens. We need a non-nationalist conception of freedom, equality, and dignity. The conservative backlash. In Keralam, like anywhere else in the world, we are witnessing the emergence of the new right as exemplified by the following things. The attack on the novel by S. Harish Misha, the mustache. The Sabarimala vigil against the entry of women. The disrespect shown to the Kanai sculpture Sagarakaniga on the Sanghamukham beach and the implementation of the economic reservation. According to Ngugi wa Thiong'o, at the heart of every political process is the question of power. Politics is simply the organization of power. Who or what social group holds power? For whom does society exercise power? The power bloc is baffled by the new assertive Adivasis and Dalits because their awakening was something they never expected. It was contradictory to the widespread and widely agreed upon descriptions of Adivasis and Dalits as inferior and irresponsible and incapable of such heroic deeds. It is like Thatcherism, which was the political reflex of an affluent but threatened first world society in a post-colonial world. The power bloc counters the new assertive Adivasis and Dalits by raising the bogey of Maoism, terrorism, and anti-nationalism. The then Chief Minister A.K. Antony labeled Muthanga struggle as anti-national. Then attempts were made to link it with PWG in Andhra and the LTT in Sri Lanka. Law and order panics were produced by tacit alliance of the media and the police. This happened in the case of, in relation to almost all the struggles coming up from the margins. Caste line and caste blindness. I posit the concept of caste line on the line of W.E.B. Du Bois, color line, and our own poverty line. Du Bois said the problem of 20th century was the color line. Here, we are all speaking about poverty line. We never speak about the caste line. The poverty of Adivasis or Dalits is not the upper caste poverty. It is different. In the words of the former US President Lyndon B. Johnson, there are deep, corrosive, obstinate differences, the consequence of ancient brutality, past injustice, and present prejudice. Dalits are inheritors of a tradition twisted and battered by endless years of hatred and hopelessness. Caste blindness refers to the refusal to acknowledge the causes and consequences of caste discrimination and prejudices. Gail Omwet, intervening in the base superstructure debate, she insisted on making caste part of the base. She argued that in India, caste and material or economic factors have always been deeply intertwined. Thus, casteism cannot be separated from the perpetual economic problems of Adivasis and Dalits. Adivasis show the lowest indices in terms of health, literacy, housing, school attendance, nutrition, and per capita income. Hunger deaths were reported in Adivasi settlements in the year 2000. Infant mortality also recorded high. The number of unwed mothers was disproportionate among Adivasis. Microaggressions and macroaggressions. These are terms coined by Dr. Pierce of the Harvard Medical School. Macroaggressions are the daily insults and derogatory comments directed against members of a marginalized group or a stigmatized group. And macroaggressions are the physical assaults like lynching and beating. Recently, we have heard about the the suicide of a police constable coming from Attapadi. His name is Kumar. In his suicide note, he wrote, "Aren't we two human beings? Don't we too have the right to live?" We come across Dalit characters, Dalit medical students in Sarah Thomas's Deva Makal, who also are subjected to ill treatment by their fellow students. One of them put up and he commits suicide in the hostel. Another one, Eacharan, he discontinues his studies and takes to political activism. He joins Communist Party and he gets killed in the Vimodana Samara. A few years ago, we heard about the sufferings of Dalits in the Govindapuram colony in Palakkad. Now, I come to the macro aggressions, some of the cases. Again from Attapadi, the murder of Madhu, whose guilt, whose crime was hunger. The recurrent honor killings in Keralam, I will mention only two. Kevin Joseph in Kottayam in May 2018, and Anish in Palakkad, recently killed by his father-in-law. The Walayar sisters' rape and murder case is still there. We never see caste in a concrete form. But in Vadayambadi, they raised a caste war, which was pulled down in 2018 by the Dalit Bhu Avagasha Samara Munnan. I remember reading an article by the Sanal Mohan in Kerala Pathanam 1994 on the humiliations and insults experienced by Dalit students in the campuses. As for microaggressions, there is no statistics on the daily humiliations experienced by Adivasis and Dalits. The role of media and the power block in circulating negative images about the stigmatized groups in our society. The media corporations promote attitudes, assumptions, and ideas and reproduce settled understandings. Those understandings are settled. They are part of the common sense. The thing is that if you belong to a group, a social group, whose prevailing image is negative, the likelihood that you will be mistreated increases. The caste people despised the Dalits and Adivasis as inferior, and they are seen as material for exploitation as well as obstacles to development. Here I mentioned some of the land struggles. See, the Kerala legislature with an exception of a single dissenting vote. The ruling and the opposition parties, they jointly repealed the 1975 Act to recover the alienated land to the Adivasis. So the Adivasis, they started the Kudil Keti Samaram, erecting huts in front of the secretariat in 2001. And it was, I think it was from this experience that the Adivasi Kotram Mahasabha emerged, the Grand Assembly of the tribes. In 2003, under the Adivasi Kotram Mahasabha, 1,100 families, Adivasi families, they entered Muthanga and they settled there. You know what happened? The police let loose brutality on them. And both the ruling and the opposition parties denounced it as anti-national. In 2007, there was Chengara struggle under Sadhu Jana Vimodana Samyukta Samadi. The leader of the struggle was Laha Gopalan. And at Aripa, in Polathupura village, they started the land struggle. In the 90 acres of land under the custody of, under the possession of Tangal Kunju Musulia, which the lease of which had expired in 2000. And there was the famous Nilpu Samaram in 2014. The Adivasi and Dalit land struggles challenged and shattered the proclamations and claims of Kerala land reforms and Kerala model of development. I quote Vatiyongo: progress and development need to be measured from the standpoint of the quality of life of those at the bottom of the mountain and not those at the top. Progress and development need to be measured from the standpoint of the quality of life of those at the bottom of the mountain and not those at the top. Only then will reason, law, and democratic ideals be in accord with the demands of social justice. Adivasis and Dalits are spatially confined in tens of thousands of colonies where they live in plots 1 to 2 cents. So these two communities, they are the colony of the people of Kerala, the power block of Kerala. The land struggles, they were not waltz from the blue. From mid-1990s, organizations like IDF, Indian Dalit Federation, under the leadership of Kallara Sumare, CDN Service Society, Athisida Namodhana Munani, KDP, Dalit Aika Samadi, etc., have been raising the demand for a second land reform. They drew attention to the inherent flow of Kerala land reforms and demanded recovery of alienated land to Adivasis. In the year 1990, the CASRs published two books. One, Keralathinte Vikasana Pradisandhi, written by M Kunyaman. Two, Dalit Deshiyada, edited by Abraham Ayruku. Both these works contained articles on the question of Dalit development. And M. Kunyaman famously said, no Dalit became a landowner through Kerala land reforms. The Muthanga movement pushed police brutality to the front of conversation in the public sphere and revealed that the majority of the landless and homeless in Kerala come from communities that were victims of slavery and displacement due to land alienation and development projects. Kerala society never acknowledged slavery as a crime against humanity. To acknowledge it is to accept responsibility for the crime and its consequences. Marxist historiography and the Subaltern Studies Collective. The Delhi-based Subaltern Studies Collective, they criticize the traditional Marxist historians for ignoring the history of the masses. Agreeing with their historical arguments, Gayatri Spivak, she added that the lingering classic Marxist approach privileges the male subaltern subject. Another very interesting thing about the Subaltern Collective is that the Subaltern Studies series is that only in the 9th edition volume was the first article on Dalit politics, contemporary Dalit politics appeared. It was an article by Kanja Alaya. I quote from the editorial, 1996 June. The essay by Kanja Alaya represents a first for subaltern studies. It is the first time subaltern studies has engaged with contemporary discussions of Dalit Bahujan politics in India. The new social movements. Resistance of the people of the margins against dominance, direction, and commands of the dominant groups and the state is treated as a social movement. Hegemonic groups do not try to transform a form of society that benefits them. Those who share conditions of exploitation and domination are the basis of the new social movements. Mainstream politics and political parties. Those who see in today's Kerala a clear confrontation between the bourgeoisie and the working class are mistaken. Electoral democracy, in which somehow arresting a majority at the time of elections has become the main stuff of politics. Keralam is more and more driven by the greed of the classes rather than the needs of the lowest, the margins. I am quoting a Latin American academic. theoretician, Daniel Camacho. He says, an electoral victory is not a victory of the left. An electoral victory is not a victory of the left. One of the defining features of cultural studies is that it is a politically committed field, and its ability to align itself with political forces and movements outside the academy. Stuart Hall, in a 1990 lecture, Cultural Studies Now and in the Future, he said, we were trying to find an institutional practice in cultural studies that might produce an organic intellectual. This intellectual is one who moves away from dogmatic approaches and tries to align with an emerging historical movement. We do not know what or which is that historical movement, but thinkers like Agamben, Derrida, and Haran Negri conceived the emerging historical movement in terms of the coming community, the new international, Derrida, and the multitude. The ethics of cultural studies is to respond to the others who have been marginalized or excluded from our dominant structures of representation and political participation. We all think and feel and act on the basis of assumptions that come from our culture. I'm quoting Michael Ryan. And that appears normal, morally right, and natural. Cultural studies asks us to step back from the culture in which we are immersed and to view it critically and analytically. Because cultural studies from its beginning, it worked in the interest of those who have the fewest resources. The notions of caste, identity, and difference are therefore central to cultural studies. Simon During, he calls for a cultural studies working on contemporary culture from non-elite or counter-hegemonic perspectives from below. Our purpose is to pursue the human project and to block the dehumanization and estrangement of others. Thank you.